Okay, welcome back to another cooking video with Taste of Grace. Today I'm going to be making a cornbread dressing. So think of like a Thanksgiving dressing that you would eat with your turkey, but it's cornbread based, and I'm going to be adding squash. The reason we're having this video in the first place is because I was given a lot of fresh squash last harvest of the summer probably, and they're smaller, but also picked at the peak of ripeness and very sweet. I actually don't like squash. I'll eat it. I will eat it. But this, I think, because it's so fresh, it's just a little too sweet for me. I need it to be a little bit more savory, and so I have to figure out a way to eat it, right? So this recipe is going to have a lot of squash in it because I'm trying to eat those vegetables, but if that's not your thing, you really just want some cornbread, don't add in as much squash. Add in some more chilies, add in jalapenos, add in more cheese, add bacon. You can really add anything you want to this. So without further ado, go ahead and get started. So first I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 350. Now, when I was given the squash, I had to immediately prep it and freeze it because it wasn't going to last. And so I've since defrosted that. So I've already kind of pre-chopped some of the squash that I have. Let's see, I may have to move, but you can see that it's already in rounds. And so what happens when you freeze vegetables like squash is when you defrost them, they release a lot of liquid. I've already drained this bag twice and it's still pretty liquidy, and so you just want to be conscious of that when you are thinking about how moist it's going to be within the dressing or the cornbread or literally anything. Are you adding a fruit to a cake recipe? Think about how much moisture the fruit or vegetable is going to be adding to that. So this is probably going to make a giant mess. Again, I've already drained this twice, and this is still, like, there's still going to be liquid everywhere. And they kind of look gross, huh? They're starting to turn. And so even though I have them chopped into rounds already, this really isn't bite size for the cornbread dressing because you're going to have lots of cornbread with it. So I'm actually going to just kind of chop these up a little bit more, and that way they're even smaller. I'm just gonna, there's no rhyme or reason to this because they're all mixed in and clumped together. If you are cutting fresh squash, you could probably do like semicircles. You know what I mean? You would cut the squash long ways and then dice down. So if you had the squash, you would cut it long ways and then dice down the squash. A little late for that here. I think I just did rounds on this one based on some of the shapes that I'm seeing. Okay, so some other ingredients that we're going to have is a 7, or actually this one's a 6 ounce, but 6 or 7 ounces of a cornbread mix. They make gluten-free cornbread mixes, or you can make your own if you're really that into it. I go for convenience a lot of the time. And then we have a 4-ounce can of green chilies, and I like the Hatch brand, but whatever chilies are available to you is fine. And then I have some shredded cheese. I thought about shredding my own cheese for this, but convenience. So you don't need a whole lot. I'm gonna use a handful of cheese, about a cup of cheese. And then I have garlic and onion powder, and actually I haven't quite decided if I'm going to use the garlic powder or fresh garlic, but I do have these two seasonings. So you could use fresh onion and garlic if you wanted to. You might consider sauteing them. Wow, that just kept going. Before adding them in, because yes, they will bake, but you're going to be missing some of the aromatic and flavor properties if you're not cooking them before you mix it with all the other ingredients. You want the cornbread to absorb that. Obviously, I have an egg. That's what that is. Raw egg for the cornbread, okay? And then I also have some not melted, it's just room temp, softened butter to grease the baking dish, which I have right here. And this is the handy dandy lid, so that's going to go over here. And then, ooh, sorry about that. The other thing is I'm going to be using about a half cup of chicken broth, and so I'm just going to be making mine with bouillon cubes, but you can use the Better Than bouillon and make your own, or you could just buy a carton or can of chicken stock. And let's see, I think I'm going to go ahead and start by adding some water to this bowl and get that bouillon going, and then we'll start mixing in some other things. So these are kind of a neat design, just a little red piece of plastic in there that you can pull. It's kind of like a tab, I guess, and dump those in. And just gonna fill this up with some water. I'm gonna put it in the microwave. Again, I'm just gonna be doing a half a cup. That's my half a cup measurement right there with my thumb. And it'll just take a minute in the microwave to heat this up. You could also just boil some water or put this on the stove, but this is the easiest way for me. Okay, so if you're not super familiar with cooking, I'm going to introduce you to a concept that's pretty important, pretty universal. When you're cooking with eggs, you want to crack the eggs either into a separate bowl, mix them separately, or do them first in your mixing bowl so that you don't end up having accidentally put shell of egg into mixing the mix, whatever you're making. Well, it's a hard egg. I've gotten the habit of just smacking these on a hard surface instead of trying to do it on the edge of a bowl or something fancy, and I think it works better. I think they crack more consistently, and it helps with opening it with my fingers. And I don't see any eggshell in there, so I'm going to wash my hands real quick, and then we'll keep moving on with some of our other items. Here's our water. So next I'm going to add in the green chilies, then we'll do seasonings, and then cheese and squash. Handy dandy can opener. Oh my gosh, it has bean juice. Gross. This must have been my husband. I'm trying to think who was the last one to heat up beans for our meal prep. Is it me? Surely I would have wiped that off. Oh well. That's why it's called Taste of Grace, right? Give yourself a little grace. Keep moving. Keep going. So I am going to pull a little Rachel Ray here, a little cooking show, because I actually made the first batch of this earlier this week, and because I haven't done this exact variation yet, and so I wanted to make sure I wasn't leading everyone astray with my recipe. And so it's already been eaten out of, but I'll show you what the original one looked like. In that one, I thought that my squash was already cut up more than it was, and of course I wasn't paying attention. So that one, the squash is a little too big. That's why I opted to have these cut up more into smaller sizes, smaller pieces. if you're from New Mexico, you're already adding green chilies to everything, so that step was a given for you. Okay, let's go ahead and do, so this is a half tablespoon. I don't know if you can see that way. Half tablespoon. And this is garlic. I'm gonna do a little bit more than what I think is actually in a recipe. This is all just, seasonings are kind of to your taste. Do you like things bland? Don't add in salt or pepper. Do you like things a little spicy? Add in some cayenne. You know, add in extra green chili. All of the above is acceptable. I'm just gonna do a little bit of salt. Do you like my white pumpkin shakers? I love them. Fall is my favorite season, and I've decided that I'm going to basically just have fall decor up all year long, including my salt and pepper shaker. Okay. So, a cup is typically about a handful. Some of the things that we teach people who are trying to diet and lose weight is how to measure things with their hands, because you're not always in a place where you have your measuring tools or things are measured out. And so if you were at a salad bar and you wanted some cheese because you don't actually like to eat salad, but it's a low calorie option, well, then you would at least be able to say, well, I ate close to a half a cup or close to a whole cup of cheese. Okay. Let's add this in, and then we'll do the bouillon. It's still beeping at me. It's sitting there, just hopefully dissolving. And then, hi, baby. And then we'll add in our cornbread. We'll grease our pan. Our oven's already preheated, unlike the first video where I did not preheat the oven correctly. That's actually probably too warm right there. Now again, this recipe has you use a lot of squash. This is, I think, about 3 squash in this one casserole. Now they were smaller, but that's where we're at, okay? Because the goal is to eat vegetables. Some of these big clumps do not want to break. Okay, let's see if I can at least get it in there. It'll just get to keep mixing in. Okay, now to add the cornbread mix. I'm using what was on sale. If I was just gonna eat cornbread, I'd probably go with Jif because that's what I was raised on. It really doesn't matter because by the time you're finished with it, it's not gonna matter. You're gonna add so much stuff. This is Martha White or something like that. I don't even know. It was on sale, and I used a yellow. There's actually yellow and white. I couldn't tell you if Jif was white or yellow, or there's different variances, or both, or anything. So that was actually new for me. Okay, let me move this stuff, and you just gotta mix it in. Oops. Not me making a mess while I'm baking. That never happened. If you want to, at this point, you can swap to a spatula and incorporate the cornbread mix into everything else that way. That's one more dish for me to wash, and I think I'm doing all right with this. Whisk. There we go. My brain kept telling me beater, and I'm like, it's not on the end of the hand mixer or a stamp. It's not a beater. And okay, moving on. I'm gonna set this over here for now. And like a hard water stain. You are from where I'm from. If you're living in West Texas, that's not new. And you also, this one did have a lid on it. I'm not sure for how long. When I pulled it out, it had a lid. So maybe there's less dust, but pretty much have to wipe the dust off of everything whenever you want to use anything. Okay. Oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever had this experience before. When I opened that, it just smelled like butter. And I've never really been attracted to the butter, but that one, that butter just smells so good. Oops, sorry. That was probably pretty loud. Okay, let's see. So I'm really focusing on getting this corner and the corners in general. This probably is not going to fill up the sides very high. The first one that I made this week, and I'll show it to you, it was in a thicker pie dish, just for the sake of the space in my oven. And I think maybe part of the problem that I had with that one, just, it's not like stupid moist, but it's pretty moist. And I think part of it's just because it was such a deep dish, it was harder to get everything cooked as evenly. Now, if you're really opposed to butter, you can use oil. Or if you need to not use oil or butter for some sort of condition, oil is going to be fine. You just want to make sure that you are mostly getting the corners. The bottom, I think, will be okay because I have so much in the corners. It'll kind of melt and mush everywhere. So there's that. This is going to go in here, or the cornbread's going to go in here. Now I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just use the cornmeal, the cornbread mix, to coat the squash and fry it? Well, those could have. But I'm trying to be a little healthier, you know? I don't know. Maybe I'm going to eat enough butter anyway. Now, on the recipe that is posted, it's for a thicker dish. Right, so I cooked, I'll show you, it's like a 1 to 2 inch, I mean, it's the same depth, but it was a round circle, and so it's not as thin laid out like this, and so the recipe says 50 to 60 minutes. I bet this takes closer to half an hour today, just because it's such a thin layer. If you like your cornbread, I like my cornbread thick, and so that was the thing behind the last one that I made being thicker. Didn't go so well because of squash. So for the dressing, I would do it thin. If you're not using as much squash, you want it to be more of a cornbread with accents, you could probably do it deeper. I mean, this is barely covering the bottom, and that would be fine. Some people like their cornbread thin too. Okay, so I'm gonna set this timer for half an hour. We'll see where we're at. I'm gonna show you the other one that I made earlier so you can kind of put it turned. Okay, so you can see it got pretty brown here on the edge, and it was pretty deep. Are you looking at it the right way? How do I? There we go. It was pretty deep, and there's a ton of squash in there, and so it's not my fave, but it'll do. All right, so that's where I'm going to leave you. If you did it deeper, it's going to take the 50 to 60 minutes, just depending on kind of the altitude of things. But if not, probably half an hour. I think it's going to be nice and crisp for you. And I hope that this recipe is something that you use, especially as you've been gardening or you just have a really good sale on squash at your store. This way you have a way to use perhaps frozen squash that gets a little mushy. You got to put it in a soup, you got to put it in casserole. Here's a squash cornbread dressing. So hope you liked it. Thanks for tuning in.